I'm Cassandra Mitchell, but everyone calls me Cassie. Today I'm 22, standing in my graduation cap and gown, diploma in hand, feeling accomplished yet uncertain. 6 years ago, my parents gave me a leather-bound book titled How to Grow Up. They thought it would mold me into their version of an adult. Instead, it became my blueprint for rebellion. When I finally grew up according to my own terms, they weren't prepared for what that actually meant. Before I tell you how my parents' gift backfired on them, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of rebellion and self-discovery. Growing up in Maplewood, Indiana, population 8,423, I lived under my parents' watchful eyes from the moment I could walk. Our white two-story colonial with blue shutters looked perfect from the outside, just like my parents wanted our family to appear. My mother, Janet, an administrative assistant at the local insurance office, managed our home with precision and rules. My father, Robert, an accountant at the same firm for 20 years, believed structure was the cornerstone of good parenting. Their control manifested in every aspect of my life. At 12, I still had a 7:30 p.m. bedtime while my friends stayed up until 9. My outfits were pre-approved. Anything revealing collarbones or knees was immediately vetoed. My mother performed weekly inspections of my room, checking under the mattress and inside pillowcases for contraband like teen magazines or makeup. My social circle underwent constant scrutiny. Potential friends had to come from good families, meaning church-going, conservative, and preferably known to my parents. Sleepovers were rare and required extensive planning and parental phone calls. When I was 14, I wasn't allowed to attend a birthday party because the girl's older brother would be in the house, despite the parents' supervision. Media consumption was strictly monitored. Movies above PG rating required pre-screening by my mother. Internet access happened in the living room on the family computer with parental controls and time limits. My first cell phone at 16 had no social media apps and came with a contract stipulating my parents could check it at any time. The expectations weighed heavily, straight as extracurricular activities that looked good on college applications, community service through church, and eventually, attendance at state university. 30 minutes from home, so I could continue living under their roof. My future career choices were limited to teacher, nurse, or perhaps accountant like my father. Anything else was dismissed as impractical or inappropriate. Meanwhile, my brother Kevin, 3 years younger, existed in an entirely different household. He stayed out until 10 p.m. at 14. His room remained unexamined. He played video games my parents would never let me touch and watched PG-13 movies without question. When I pointed out this discrepancy, my mother would say, "Boys and girls are different, Cassie. The world is more dangerous for young women." The double standard gnawed at me. Each year, the rope around my freedom tightened while Kevin's extended. I began keeping a journal of the disparities, hidden in a hollowed-out copy of Little Women my grandmother had given me, the only book my mother wouldn't think to check. I loved my parents. I truly did. But love and resentment twisted together like vines around my heart. I recognized their intentions came from protection, but their methods stemmed from control. Every time I met their expectations, they created new, higher ones. Perfect wasn't enough. I needed to be perfect while also being grateful for their guidance. The turning point came on my 16th birthday. After months of subtle hints and careful behavior, I'd secured permission for a modest party with 8 friends. We planned to watch movies, eat pizza, and just talk without parents hovering. For 3 hours, I felt normal. Then my father burst in during our movie, announcing it was cake time. My mother followed with a homemade cake featuring a photo of me as a toddler in the bathtub printed in edible ink. As my friends giggled uncomfortably, my parents led an off-key rendition of Happy Birthday and reminded everyone the party would end promptly at 8 p.m. My mother then distributed party favors, personal hygiene kits with mini deodorants and feminine products. I smiled mechanically through burning humiliation. When my friends left, each hugging me with pitying expressions, something solidified within me. I couldn't continue like this. The next morning, my parents presented me with a wrapped package. "This is the real gift," my mother said, eyes bright with anticipation. "We've been saving it for when you're mature enough." Inside was a book titled How to Grow Up, A Young Woman's Guide to Responsibility and Respect. The cover featured a young woman in a modest dress, smiling demurely. "This book changed my life when I was your age," my mother explained. "It will help you navigate these challenging teenage years and prepare for womanhood." My father nodded solemnly. "Consider it a roadmap to becoming the remarkable young lady we know you can be." I thanked them with what I hoped appeared as genuine gratitude, while inside, my heart sank. Another tool for control, another set of expectations packaged as guidance. I placed it on my nightstand, promising to start reading that night, never expecting how profoundly this book would indeed change my life, just not in the way my parents intended. The book sat on my nightstand for 3 days before I worked up the courage to open it. The leather binding creaked as I flipped to the table of contents. Chapter titles like The Virtue of Obedience, Modesty, Your Moral Armor, and Planning Your Future, Appropriate Ambitions for Young Women, confirmed my suspicions. Published in 1983, the book read like a relic from another century. I skimmed through, growing increasingly irritated. The chapter on relationships suggested that challenging a parent's wisdom creates unnecessary friction and demonstrates immaturity. Another advised that a young woman's appearance reflects her moral character, recommending skirts below the knee and avoiding attention-seeking colors. The career section focused primarily on positions that would complement future family responsibilities, with teaching and nursing featured prominently. Most infuriating was the section on independent thinking, which essentially discouraged it. While developing your own perspective is important, remember that more experienced individuals, parents, teachers, pastors, have wisdom you lack. When your thoughts conflict with theirs, careful reflection will often reveal the error in your thinking. I tossed the book aside, flopping back on my bed in frustration. This wasn't guidance, it was a manual for creating compliant daughters. I texted my best friend Bethany. "Parents gave me literal instruction manual on how to be perfect daughter. Consider me officially over it." Bethany responded immediately, "Bring it to school tomorrow. Need to see this fossil." The next day, we huddled in the library during lunch period, giggling over the outdated advice and archaic language. As we reached the chapter on respecting authority, Bethany stopped laughing. "Wait, this is actually interesting in a weird way," she said, tapping the page thoughtfully. "What could possibly be interesting about honoring your parents' decisions without question?" I asked, rolling my eyes. "Not the advice itself, what it reveals," Bethany explained. "This book is basically a catalog of everything your parents are afraid of. It's like having access to their deepest fears about raising a daughter." I stared at her, the realization dawning slowly. "You mean this book isn't telling you how to grow up," Bethany said. "It's telling you exactly what your parents are terrified of you doing. It's like they handed you their playbook." Looking back at the book with new eyes, I began to see patterns. The emphasis on modest clothing revealed my mother's fear of male attention directed at me. The sections on respectful communication showed my father's anxiety about losing authority. The career chapters betrayed their worry that I might move far away, prioritizing career over family. "This isn't about making you a better person," Bethany continued. "It's about making you a safer investment, less likely to cause them pain or embarrassment." That night, I read the book cover to cover, taking notes not on the advice, but on what it revealed about my parents' psychology. I began connecting their rules to specific fears identified in the book. Their refusal to let me attend concerts stemmed from the chapter warning about crowd environments where moral standards dissolve. Their insistence on meeting all my friends' parents aligned with warnings about negative peer influences entering through seemingly innocent friendships. The book became my Rosetta Stone for decoding my parents. I highlighted passages that explained their reactions, made notes about how certain topics triggered stronger responses than others. I began to see them not as unreasonable tyrants, but as deeply fearful people trying to protect me from dangers they perceived everywhere. This understanding didn't excuse their control, but it gave me something powerful: predictability. If I could anticipate their fears, I could address them preemptively. If I spoke their language of values and responsibility, I might navigate around their barriers. The following Sunday, I left the book conspicuously open on my desk before dinner, highlighted and annotated. When my mother came to calm me down, she noticed it immediately. "You're actually reading it," she said, surprise evident in her voice as she picked it up and examined my notes. "It's giving me a lot to think about," I replied carefully. "Especially the parts about developing maturity through thoughtful decision-making." My mother's face brightened. "That was always my favorite chapter. Your father will be so pleased you're taking it seriously." At dinner, I mentioned concepts from the book, watching my parents exchange delighted glances. I wasn't being dishonest. I was simply focusing on the aspects of the book that resonated with them while developing my own interpretation of what growing up truly meant. That night, I made a decision. I would use this book not as a guide to follow, but as a map to navigate around my parents' fears. I would become fluent in their language of values while quietly building my own path to independence. The book wouldn't make me the daughter they wanted, it would help me become the person I needed to be, right under their watchful eyes. My rebellion began with baby steps, carefully calculated to fly just under my parents' radar. I started using the book's language strategically, framing my requests in terms they couldn't easily refuse without contradicting their own values. When I wanted to join the debate team, an activity my parents initially deemed confrontational and unladylike, I referenced the book's chapter on articulate expression of values. I've been reflecting on how the book talks about young women developing the ability to express themselves clearly and defend traditional values, I told my father over breakfast. Debate seems like the perfect way to practice those skills, especially since our coach, Mr. Patterson, focuses on respectful discourse. My father looked up from his newspaper, surprised but intrigued. "The book does emphasize the importance of clear communication," he conceded. "And it would look excellent on college applications," my mother added, unwittingly supporting my case. Permission granted. My first small victory tasted sweeter than the pancakes on my plate. I applied this approach systematically, always starting conversations about new opportunities by connecting them to principles from the book, as it became known in our household. Photography club became acceptable when framed as capturing the beauty in God's creation. Volunteering at the local animal shelter transformed from wasting time with strays to developing nurturing skills and community responsibility. My parents began to relax their vigilance as they saw me apparently embracing the book's guidance. The irony wasn't lost on me. The more I referenced it, the less they enforced their previous restrictions. They extended my curfew to 10 p.m. on weekends. They stopped pre-screening my movie choices. They even allowed me to go to the mall with friends without checking in every hour. The turning point came during my junior year when the French teacher announced a spring break trip to Paris. Historically, such a request would have been met with an immediate, absolutely not. International travel? Unsupervised hotel stays? European values? Everything my parents feared. I spent 2 weeks preparing my strategy, highlighting relevant passages in the book, researching safety statistics, and creating a detailed itinerary emphasizing educational components. I enlisted my French teacher, Madame Bernard, to write a letter emphasizing the cultural and educational benefits. Then I waited for the perfect moment, Sunday dinner, when my parents were most relaxed. Madame Bernard is organizing an educational trip to Paris for serious French students, I mentioned casually. She specifically recommended me based on my grades. As expected, my parents exchanged concerned glances. "Paris is quite far, Cassandra," my father said, using my full name as he always did when setting boundaries. "I know it seems intimidating," I acknowledged, "but the book has a whole section on expanding horizons with purpose. It talks about how cultural experiences build character when approached with the right mindset." I pulled out my prepared folder containing the detailed itinerary, safety precautions, and Madame Bernard's glowing recommendation. "I've researched everything carefully, considering all the concerns you might have. This isn't about frivolous sightseeing, it's about academic growth and responsible exploration." The discussion lasted nearly 2 hours. I remained calm and reasonable, addressing each concern with prepared responses that referenced their values and the book's principles. When my father worried about unsupervised time, I showed him the chaperoning arrangements. When my mother fretted about appropriate clothing for European weather, I presented a modest packing list. To my amazement, they eventually agreed, with conditions. I would call daily. I would stay within sight of chaperones. I would bring the book with me as a reminder of home values. That night, I texted Bethany, Operation Paris, success. Her response came immediately. The student becomes the master. The book strategy is genius. As junior year progressed, my careful maneuvering continued to expand my freedoms. My parents began to see me as exceptionally mature for my age, often commenting on how the book had transformed me. At a family gathering, I overheard my mother telling my aunt, "The change in Cassie since reading that book is remarkable. She's become so thoughtful and responsible." My aunt glanced toward where I sat with my younger cousins. "Maybe I should get a copy for Melissa. She's been so difficult lately." "Absolutely," my mother nodded enthusiastically. "It teaches them to make good decisions instead of just following rules blindly." I suppressed a smile at the irony. My parents believed the book had made me more compliant when in reality, it had taught me to navigate around their control while appearing to embrace it. Not everyone was fooled by my performance. During AP Psychology, I had written a paper on adolescent autonomy that caught Ms. Delaney's attention. She asked me to stay after class one day. "Interesting paper, Cassie," she said once the room had emptied. "Particularly your analysis of how adolescents navigate parental authority structures." I shifted uncomfortably. "It's just theoretical." Ms. Delaney leaned against her desk. "Is it? Because it reads like a very personal case study." Her perceptiveness unnerved me. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you do," she replied gently. "I've noticed the change in you this year, how you phrase things, how you present your requests to participate in activities. It's quite sophisticated." Heat rose to my face. "I'm just trying to communicate effectively." "That's one way to put it." She smiled knowingly. "Another might be that you've figured out how to work within a restrictive system while appearing to embrace it. It's a survival strategy many people in oppressive situations develop." The word oppressive hung in the air between us. I had never characterized my home life that way, even in my own thoughts. "I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong," Ms. Delaney continued. "In fact, it shows remarkable emotional intelligence. Just be careful. Living behind a mask, even one you've crafted skillfully, takes a toll. Don't lose yourself in the performance." Her words stayed with me, raising uncomfortable questions. Was I being authentic in any part of my life? Or had I become so focused on strategic communication that I'd lost sight of what I actually wanted? But these philosophical concerns took a back seat as my carefully constructed world of negotiated freedoms continued to expand. By senior year, I had earned enough trust to go on weekend trips with the debate team, attend concerts with minimal questioning, and even date, albeit with significant restrictions and curfews. My brother Kevin watched my transformation with curiosity. "How do you get them to say yes to everything now?" he asked after I received permission for a weekend journalism conference. "I speak their language," I replied, tapping the book that had become my constant companion. "Figure out what they're afraid of and show them why they don't need to be afraid." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "So you're manipulating them?" I winced at the harsh assessment. "I prefer to think of it as strategic communication." "I'm not lying, I'm just framing things in ways they can accept." As my high school graduation approached, I knew my carefully constructed system would face its greatest test. Because while my parents thought I was becoming the perfect daughter described in their book, I was actually preparing for something that would shake our family to its core. Senior year brought the inevitable collision course between my parents' expectations and my own plans. While they had always assumed I would attend State University, close enough to live at home or visit every weekend, I had quietly set my sights much higher. Northwestern University represented everything I wanted: academic excellence, a vibrant campus culture, and most importantly, distance. Chicago was nearly 4 hours from Maplewood, far enough to necessitate independence, but close enough to theoretically return for holidays. I had prepared meticulously for this moment since sophomore year. My grades were impeccable. My extracurriculars, debate team captain, newspaper editor, volunteer work, created a compelling application. I'd secured glowing recommendation letters from teachers impressed by my maturity and thoughtful perspective. I'd even written my application essay on how a certain book had taught me to approach adulthood with responsibility and purpose. Knowing no admissions officer would recognize the irony. When my Northwestern application was due, I told my parents I was completing scholarship forms for state. This wasn't entirely untrue. I had applied to state as my backup plan. The application fee for Northwestern came from babysitting money I'd saved in a separate account they didn't monitor. Acceptance letters typically arrived in March. I arranged to have my mail delivered to Bethany's house for that month, checking daily. When the thick envelope from Northwestern finally arrived, containing not just acceptance, but a substantial scholarship, I experienced equal parts elation and dread. The moment of truth couldn't be postponed any longer. I spent a week preparing my approach. I studied the book's chapter on planning your future extensively, highlighting passages about making thoughtful decisions and pursuing excellence. I created a presentation outlining Northwestern's academic reputation, safety statistics, and religious student organizations. I calculated budgets showing how my scholarship and part-time work could offset costs. I chose a Tuesday evening to share my news. Tuesdays were when my father was most relaxed, having finished his weekly reports at work. I helped my mother prepare dinner, complimenting her cooking and asking about her day, establishing a positive atmosphere before the storm. As we sat down to eat, I took a deep breath. I have some exciting news to share. My parents looked up expectantly. My father smiled. Did you hear about the scholarship at state? Actually, I said carefully, I've been accepted to Northwestern University with a substantial academic scholarship. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My father's smile vanished. Northwestern, he repeated. In Chicago? I nodded, maintaining my composure. It's one of the top universities in the country. Their journalism program is ranked 5th nationally. Journalism. My mother's voice rose slightly. I thought you were considering education or business. I've been passionate about journalism since joining the school newspaper, I explained. Remember how the book talks about finding purpose through meaningful work? Journalism aligns perfectly with my strengths in writing and research. My father placed his napkin beside his plate, a bad sign. Cassandra, we've always been clear about our expectations. State University has perfectly good programs close to home. I understand your concerns, I said, pulling out my prepared folder. That's why I've researched everything thoroughly. Northwestern has excellent campus security, and I've already connected with the Christian Students Association. And with my scholarship, the cost difference is minimal. This isn't about money, my mother interjected, her voice trembling slightly. It's about family. About staying connected during these important years. The book actually addresses this, I countered, opening to a bookmarked page. It talks about how maturity sometimes requires stepping outside one's comfort zone and taking on new responsibilities. My father's face darkened. Don't use that book against us, Cassandra. We gave it to you as guidance, not as ammunition. The conversation deteriorated rapidly from there. My carefully constructed arguments crumbled as emotion overwhelmed reason. My parents couldn't see beyond the threat of separation. Every point I raised was countered with concerns about my safety, my values, my connection to family. 4 hours away might as well be 400, my mother said tearfully. You'll never come home. You'll forget everything we've taught you. That's not true, I insisted. This is about education, not rejection. After an hour of increasingly circular arguments, my father delivered the ultimatum I had feared but expected. If you insist on Northwestern, you'll do it without our financial support. State University is the only option we'll help fund. I had anticipated this possibility. I understand, I said quietly. I've been approved for student loans and my scholarship covers a significant portion. I can work part-time for living expenses. My father's face registered shock that quickly turned to anger. You've planned this all along, he realized. While pretending to embrace our values, you've been plotting to leave. I haven't been pretending, I insisted, though the words felt hollow even to me. I've genuinely tried to grow into a responsible adult. We just have different definitions of what that means. The dinner ended with my mother in tears and my father in stony silence. My brother Kevin stared at his plate, occasionally glancing up with wide eyes at the unprecedented confrontation. As I helped clear the dishes functioning on autopilot, I recognized that the careful balance I'd maintained for years had finally collapsed. That night, lying in bed, I faced the reality that strategic communication had reached its limit. The gap between my parents' expectations and my aspirations couldn't be bridged with carefully chosen words. For the first time, I would have to openly defy them rather than work around them. The realization was both terrifying and strangely liberating. The book that had been my guide to navigating their expectations now needed to become my manual for complete independence. I would need to take its lessons on responsibility and maturity and apply them in ways my parents never intended. The coming months would require more courage than clever strategy. I opened the book one more time, this time to the final chapter titled, Becoming Your Own Person. The irony wasn't lost on me as I began to highlight sections that might help me do exactly that, just not in the way the author or my parents had ever envisioned. With the Northwestern conflict in the open, I needed to transition from subtle negotiation to overt independence. The final months of senior year became my crash course in adulting, real adulting, not the sanitized version from the book. My first step was financial planning. The morning after our confrontation, I made an appointment with Mrs. Hendricks, the school guidance counselor. I need to understand all my financial aid options, I explained. My parents won't be contributing to my education. Mrs. Hendricks seemed unsurprised. She'd worked with enough students to recognize family conflict when she saw it. Let's go through everything systematically, she said, pulling out forms and brochures. Your scholarship is an excellent start. Over the next hour, she walked me through federal loans, work-study programs, and additional scholarship opportunities. The numbers were daunting, but not impossible. With careful budgeting and part-time work, I could make it through at least the first year. Beyond that, academic performance could qualify me for additional merit scholarships. It won't be easy, Mrs. Hendricks warned. Working while maintaining grades at Northwestern will be challenging. I understand, I replied. But it's important to me. She studied me for a moment. You know, every year I see students make college decisions to please their parents. Very few have the courage to choose their own path when it means real sacrifice. Her words strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about escaping control, it was about claiming agency over my own life. Next, I needed income. My previous babysitting jobs wouldn't provide sufficient funds for college expenses. Through Mrs. Hendricks, I found a position at the local library for 20 hours weekly. The pay was modest, but the quiet environment allowed me to study during slow periods. I arranged my schedule around school activities, working evenings and weekends. My parents watched my new independence with a mixture of disapproval and confusion. They'd expected my determination to crumble in the face of financial reality. Instead, they saw me leaving for school early, returning home from work late, spending weekends researching scholarships and budgeting apps. This phase will pass, I overheard my mother telling my father one night. Once she realizes how difficult it will be on her own, she'll reconsider state. But their prediction of my failure only fueled my determination. I opened a separate bank account where my paychecks were directly deposited. I created spreadsheets tracking every expense I would face: textbooks, meal plans, transportation, personal items. I researched student housing options, eventually connecting with a potential roommate, Madison, through Northwestern's freshman forum. Madison and I clicked immediately during our video chats. From Seattle, she shared my excitement about journalism and independence. We compared notes on residence halls, eventually applying for a shared room in Foster Walker Complex, affectionately known as Plex by students. My parents are super supportive, Madison mentioned during one call. They're helping with my plane tickets to visit campus before orientation. Could you meet up then? I hesitated, reluctant to admit my situation. I'm not sure I'll be visiting before fall. My schedule is pretty packed. Madison gave me a knowing look through the screen. Family not on board with Northwestern? Something like that, I admitted. Been there, she said sympathetically. My parents freaked when my brother chose NYU instead of University of Washington. They came around eventually. Give them time. Her understanding helped ease the isolation I'd been feeling. Perhaps this rupture with my parents wasn't permanent, just a painful transition toward a new kind of relationship. At home, tensions remained high but had settled into a cold war rather than active conflict. My parents limited conversation to practical matters, as if accepting my decision but unwilling to endorse it. I maintained my respectful demeanor, still helping with chores and family obligations, but our previous closeness had evaporated. The tenuous truce shattered in early May when my mother entered my room without knocking, something she hadn't done since our initial confrontation, and found me on a video call with Madison discussing move-in plans. "Who is that?" she demanded, standing in the doorway. "My roommate at Northwestern," I answered, seeing no point in deception. "Madison, this is my mom." "Mom, this is Madison from Seattle." Madison waved awkwardly. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Mitchell. I've heard great things about your daughter." My mother didn't acknowledge the greeting. "I need to speak with Cassandra privately," she said before turning and walking out. I quickly ended the call, promising Madison I'd text her later. When I went downstairs, I found both parents waiting in the living room, my father holding printed pages I immediately recognized from my email account. "You've been accessing my emails," I stated flatly. "We pay for the internet in this house," my father replied. And it seems our concerns were justified. He held up confirmation emails from Northwestern housing, orientation registration, and student loan applications. "You're really going through with this," my mother said, her voice a mixture of anger and hurt. "After everything we've done for you." "I've never lied about my intentions," I responded, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I've been clear about wanting to attend Northwestern since we first discussed it." "What you've been is deceitful," my father countered. "Making these arrangements behind our backs while pretending to consider our perspective." The accusation stung particularly because it contained a kernel of truth. I had strategically managed their expectations for years. The line between communication and manipulation had often blurred in my efforts to gain independence. "I'm sorry you feel deceived," I said carefully. "But I've made my decision after careful consideration. I hope you'll eventually support it, but I understand if you can't right now." My father's face reddened. "Support? You expect support for throwing away everything we've taught you? For rejecting our guidance and financial help to run off to a liberal university in Chicago?" "Robert," my mother placed a hand on his arm, her voice softening. "Maybe we should." "No, Janet," he interrupted. "No more coddling. Cassandra needs to understand consequences." He turned back to me. "If Northwestern means more to you than family, then you can consider your graduation party canceled. I won't celebrate choices that undermine everything we stand for." The graduation party, a tradition my parents had talked about since I started high school. Relatives would be flying in. Invitations had already been sent to family, friends, and church members. The cancellation would be both logistically complicated and socially embarrassing. I took a deep breath, reaching for the composure I'd practiced for years. "That seems unnecessarily punitive," I said evenly. "The party isn't just for me, it's for you too, and for relatives who want to celebrate regardless of my college choice." "Don't use that reasonable tone with me," my father snapped. "This isn't a debate club argument. This is about loyalty and respect." I recognize the futility of continued discussion. "I understand you're upset. I'll be in my room if you want to talk more when emotions aren't so high." As I turned to leave, my mother spoke again. "Cassie, please. Just consider how this is affecting the family. Kevin is watching everything you do. What example are you setting?" I paused at the stairs. "Maybe a good one," I replied quietly. "That it's possible to make difficult choices respectfully but firmly. That growing up sometimes means disappointing people you love to become the person you need to be." I continued upstairs, my heart pounding, but my resolve strengthened. The book they'd given me devoted an entire chapter to standing by your principles. Though the author had likely intended those principles to align with parental expectations, the core message applied perfectly to my situation. Maturity meant making difficult choices and accepting their consequences. In my room, I pulled out the book again, this time seeing it with completely new eyes. Beyond its conservative content lay a template for independence, albeit one I was applying in ways its author never intended. The chapters on financial responsibility, thoughtful decision-making, and personal integrity contained genuinely useful guidance for someone embarking on independent adulthood. For the first time, I felt genuine gratitude for the gift. Not because it had molded me into my parents' vision, but because it had inadvertently provided the framework for my liberation. As graduation approached, I would need every lesson it contained, just not in the way anyone had expected. Graduation day arrived with tense anticipation. Despite my father's threat, the party hadn't been canceled. My mother had quietly intervened, convincing him that family obligations and already sent invitations made cancellation impractical. Instead, we'd settled into an uneasy arrangement. The celebration would proceed, but with the understanding that my college choice remained unendorsed. The ceremony itself held a particular weight for me as class valedictorian. My speech had undergone multiple revisions as I balanced my desire for authentic expression against the need to avoid further family conflict. The final version walked a careful line, emphasizing the importance of both gratitude for guidance and courage to forge new paths. Standing at the podium in my cap and gown, facing rows of classmates and families in the school gymnasium, I took a steadying breath. My parents sat in the front row, my mother dabbing occasional tears, my father maintaining his characteristic composure. I could read pride in their expressions despite our ongoing tension. Fellow graduates, parents, teachers, and friends, I began. Today marks not an ending but a transition from guidance to choice, from protection to possibility. As I continued through my prepared remarks about gratitude for our education and excitement for the future, I maintained eye contact with various sections of the audience, including my parents during key passages about appreciation for those who had shaped us. The pivotal moment came near the end of my speech. Growing up isn't about following a predetermined path, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It's about developing the wisdom to chart your own course while honoring the values that truly resonate with your authentic self. Sometimes that means difficult choices. Sometimes it means disappointing people you respect. But ultimately, the measure of maturity isn't compliance, it's thoughtful independence. I saw my father shift slightly in his seat, recognizing the subtle challenge in my words. My mother's expression remained supportive, though complexity flickered across her features. As we leave Maplewood High today, let's carry forward both gratitude for the foundations we've been given and courage to build upon them in ways that might surprise even those who know us best. Thank you. The applause felt validating, not just for the speech, but for the stance I'd taken in my life. Several teachers gave me meaningful nods as I returned to my seat, Ms. Delaney among them. After the ceremony, we navigated the expected photographs and congratulations from family friends. My parents maintained a united front of pride in my academic achievements while carefully sidestepping questions about my college plans. When relatives inevitably asked, my mother would say simply, "Cassie has some exciting opportunities she's considering," before changing the subject. The graduation party at our home that afternoon presented the greatest challenge. Extended family had arrived from various states, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Many unaware of the tension beneath our smiling family photos. Our backyard had been transformed with white tents, catered food, and congratulatory banners. A table near the entrance displayed my academic awards, sports certificates, and a framed copy of my acceptance letter to State University. My mother's doing, I suspected, maintaining appearances. For 2 hours, I played my part impeccably, graciously accepting congratulations, discussing summer plans vaguely, deflecting college questions with practiced responses about weighing options. I circulated among guests with practiced poise, the perfect daughter my parents had raised me to be. The inevitable moment came during dinner when my father rose for a toast. Glasses clinked as attention turned to him. To him. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled relatives. My father continued, "When Cassie turned 16, we gave her a book called How to Grow Up. Unlike most teenagers who might have rolled their eyes, She embraced its wisdom. The transformation has been remarkable. She's living proof that with the right guidance, young people can navigate these challenging times without losing their way. He raised his glass higher. To Cassandra, as she prepares for State University this fall, may she continue to make us proud. A chorus of "To Cassandra" followed as glasses raised. I sipped my sparkling cider, the irony of the moment almost overwhelming. Something shifted inside me. 6 years of strategic communication, of careful navigation around their expectations while building my secret independence, it suddenly felt unsustainable. I had graduated. I was legally an adult. Northwestern's deposit was paid, housing secured. The time for pretense had passed. I stood, surprising everyone as toasts had concluded. "I'd like to say something, if I may." My father's expression flickered with concern, but social convention prevented him from objecting. Conversations quieted as attention turned to me. "Thank you all for celebrating with us today," I began, my voice steady. "And thank you, Dad, for those kind words. That book you mentioned has indeed been transformative, just not quite in the way you might think." I removed the small leather volume from my purse, where I'd placed it specifically for this moment. When my parents gave me How to Grow Up, I initially saw it as another attempt to mold me into a perfect daughter. But over time, it became something much more valuable, a window into understanding my parents' fears and hopes for me. My mother's eyes widened slightly. My father's smile had frozen. This book taught me that growing up isn't about blindly following rules, but about developing the judgment to make thoughtful decisions, even difficult ones. It taught me that maturity means taking responsibility for your choices and their consequences. I turned slightly to address my parents directly. "Mom and Dad, I want to thank you sincerely for this gift. It helped me understand your perspective while developing my own. It gave me the tools to communicate effectively and navigate challenging situations." Then, turning back to our gathered relatives, I continued, "Which is why I've decided to attend Northwestern University this fall on an academic scholarship. I'll be studying journalism with a minor in political science." A ripple of confused congratulations moved through the crowd. Family members glanced between my announcement and my father's increasingly stony expression. "Northwestern is an exceptional school," I added, "and while it means being 4 hours from home instead of 30 minutes, the opportunity is one I couldn't pass up. Even though it means working part-time and taking student loans to make it possible." My Aunt Caroline broke the awkward silence. "Northwestern. That's wonderful, Cassie. Isn't that one of the top schools in the country?" Other relatives joined in with congratulations, unaware of the tension simmering beneath the surface. My mother maintained a tight smile while my father stared at his plate. "I share this today," I concluded, "because growing up means being honest about who you are and the path you're choosing. The book taught me that, though perhaps not in the way it was intended. So thank you again, Mom and Dad, for giving me not just this book, but the foundation to interpret it in my own way." I raised my glass. "To new beginnings." The toast was echoed awkwardly as guests gradually recognized the undercurrent of family tension. Conversations resumed with forced enthusiasm as I returned to my seat, heart pounding, but strangely liberated. My father excused himself shortly after. My mother followed, then returned alone to maintain hostess duties. The party continued with the peculiar energy of a gathering where something significant but unspoken has occurred. As guests departed, several older relatives squeezed my hand with knowing looks. My grandmother whispered, "Your grandfather and I eloped because my parents disapproved of him." Sometimes the hardest paths lead exactly where you're meant to go. By evening, as the last relatives left and the catering staff cleared away tables, the full impact of my public declaration settled over our household. I had chosen authenticity over strategy, transparency over manipulation. Whether this would ultimately heal or further damage my relationship with my parents remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, I felt fully aligned with myself, no more double life, no more carefully constructed persona. That night, I packed my graduation gifts in my room, including several surprising checks from relatives who had whispered encouragement about Northwestern. My phone buzzed with a text from Bethany, "Heard about your grand announcement from my mom." Legendary. You finally used the book against them in the most epic way possible. I stared at her message, realizing that wasn't how I saw it at all. I hadn't used the book against my parents. In a strange way, I had fulfilled its ultimate purpose, becoming a thoughtful, independent adult capable of making difficult decisions and accepting their consequences. Just not the specific adult they had envisioned. I texted back, not against them. For myself. Big difference. Then I placed the book on my nightstand, no longer a strategy manual, but a reminder of the complicated journey that had brought me to this moment of clarity. ## Part 8. Resolution and Life Lessons. 3 months later, I stood in my Northwestern dormitory room, carefully arranging books on my desk shelf. Through the window, Lake Michigan stretched like an inland sea, its vastness both intimidating and exhilarating, much like my new independence. Moving day had been a solo journey. After weeks of minimal communication following my graduation announcement, my parents had maintained their position. They wouldn't actively prevent my Northwestern plans, but neither would they facilitate them. My father remained convinced I would call within weeks, homesick and overwhelmed, asking to transfer to state. So I had arrived via Greyhound bus, my belongings condensed to 2 suitcases and a backpack. The minimalist approach wasn't entirely financial necessity, it also represented shedding my old life and embracing a fresh start. Madison arrived shortly after me, accompanied by parents who helped unload a car filled with dorm essentials. They were warm and inclusive, insisting on taking me to dinner with them and offering to ship anything I might need from Seattle. Their easy acceptance highlighted the absence of my own family, but I pushed away self-pity. This was my choice and its natural consequence. University life quickly consumed my attention. Orientation week introduced an overwhelming array of activities, resources, and faces. I navigated registration, campus tours, and social events with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. For the first time, no one had preconceptions about me or expectations beyond those I created myself. The freedom was intoxicating. Financial reality provided a sobering counterbalance to this freedom. While my scholarship covered a significant portion of tuition, living expenses remained daunting. I secured a position at the university library working 15 hours weekly, supplemented by weekend shifts at a campus coffee shop. My carefully constructed budget left minimal room for extras, but compared to my previously restricted life, even this constrained independence felt luxurious. Academically, Northwestern proved both challenging and stimulating. My journalism professors pushed boundaries I hadn't known existed, questioning assumptions and demanding rigorous thought. For someone raised with clear distinctions between right and wrong, the nuanced ethical discussions initially unsettled me. Gradually, though, I recognized this discomfort as growth, the expansion of my intellectual and moral framework beyond my upbringing's narrow parameters. Communication with my parents during those first months remained limited and awkward. My mother sent occasional texts checking on my basic welfare. My responses were polite but brief. My father maintained his silence, communicating only through my mother. The first significant shift came in late September. After submitting a feature article for my Journalism Fundamentals course, my professor held it up as an exemplary piece during class discussion. The validation prompted me to share it with my mother, a tentative olive branch. Her response surprised me. "This is excellent, Cassie. Your writing has always been your strength." Dad read it too. The acknowledgement that my father had engaged with my work, even without directly communicating, represented progress. A week later, a care package arrived containing homemade cookies, socks, and a handwritten note. "We miss you. The house is too quiet. Love, Mom." I called that evening. Our conversation remained superficial, campus food, classes, weather, but the underlying tension had eased slightly. We ended with a tacit agreement to talk weekly, a routine that gradually standardized into Sunday evening calls. October brought midterms and increased workload, stretching my time management skills. Late nights in the library became routine as I balanced academics with work responsibilities. During one particularly exhausting study session, I found myself pulling out the book, How to Grow Up, which I'd brought more as a talisman than a reference. Flipping through its pages with new perspective, I recognized strands of wisdom interwoven with its outdated values. The sections on perseverance and self-discipline resonated differently now that I was applying them to challenges of my own choosing. Even the chapters on respect and communication contained insights valuable for navigating adult relationships, including the evolving one with my parents. Halloween marked another milestone when my mother called outside our regular schedule. "Your brother wants to apply to Michigan State for their engineering program," she said without preamble. "Your father is concerned about the distance." I understood immediately why she'd called. "How's Kevin handling it?" "He keeps mentioning you," she sighed. "Says if you can manage Northwestern on your own, he can certainly handle Michigan State." "Dad must love that argument," I remarked, unable to suppress a smile. "He's struggling," she admitted. "But I think seeing you manage has affected him more than he acknowledges. He asks about your classes when I get off our calls." The revelation warmed something in me. "Michigan State has an excellent engineering program," I offered. "And it would be good for Kevin to experience some independence." "That's what I think too," my mother said softly. "I just don't know how to help your father see it." For the first time since our relationship fractured, my mother was seeking my advice. The role reversal felt significant. Maybe remind him that the values he raised us with don't disappear when we leave home. They just get tested and strengthened. That's what growing up is. The silence on the line suggested my words had landed meaningfully. "When did you get so wise?" she finally asked. "I had good teachers," I replied, even when I disagreed with their methods. Thanksgiving break presented the next hurdle. Flying home was financially impossible with my tight budget, a reality I'd accepted when choosing Northwestern. I had planned to remain on campus, one of the few international and out-of-state students in otherwise empty dormitories. 2 weeks before the holiday, my mother called again. "We've been thinking about Thanksgiving," she began tentatively. "Would you consider coming home if we covered the bus ticket?" The invitation represented more than holiday plans. It was an acknowledgement of my independence, coupled with a desire for reconciliation. "I'd like that," I replied, emotion tightening my throat. My return to Maplewood proved simultaneously familiar and foreign. The house remained unchanged physically, yet my perception of it had transformed completely. My bedroom felt smaller, the town more confined. Yet family dinner, with my mother's traditional recipes and my brother's animated engineering talk, evoked a warmth I had missed. My father maintained a certain reserve, but cracks appeared in his disapproval. He asked about my journalism courses, listening attentively to my descriptions of investigative methods and media ethics. When I mentioned a challenging economics prerequisite, he offered unsolicited but welcome advice based on his accounting background. The most revealing moment came Thanksgiving evening as I helped him wash dishes, a task that had always facilitated our rare heart-to-heart conversations. "Your professor's comments on that article were quite perceptive," he said, focusing intently on a serving platter. "You have a talent for humanizing complex issues." The compliment caught me off guard. "You've been reading my assignments?" "Your mother shares them," he admitted. "You're doing good work, Cassandra." Challenging work. Coming from my father, this represented significant concession. "Thank you," I replied simply. "That means a lot." He rinsed another dish before adding, "I still think you could have gotten a comparable education closer to home. But I can see you're thriving, despite the circumstances." "Maybe because of them," I suggested gently. "Having to be entirely self-reliant has taught me things no classroom could." He nodded thoughtfully. "Your brother wants to visit Michigan State's campus next month." "It's a good school," I offered neutrally. "So your mother keeps telling me." He handed me a glass to dry. "She thinks I should be more supportive of his choice after everything with you." "And what do you think?" He considered this as he drained the sink. "I think I might have been holding on too tightly." "To both of you." The admission represented a seismic shift in my father's perspective. I restrained myself from commenting, allowing the moment its natural weight. Returning to Northwestern after Thanksgiving carried a different emotional quality. While I had left home in August feeling exiled by my choices, I now returned to campus with a sense of having two incomplete but valid homes, the family foundation that had shaped me and the independent life I was building. As final exams approached, bringing my first college semester to a close, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. The book that had initially represented parental control had ultimately facilitated my independence in ways neither my parents nor I could have anticipated. One evening, procrastinating on a media theory paper, I opened the book to its final chapter. The closing paragraph caught my attention. True maturity isn't measured by age or accomplishments, but by the wisdom to honor valuable guidance while finding your unique path. Growing up means recognizing that the greatest respect you can show those who raised you is not blind obedience to their vision, but thoughtful application of their best teachings as you write your own story. I smiled at the passage I had previously dismissed as platitude. Read from my current perspective, it contained profound truth, just not the interpretation my parents had intended. The journey to adulthood wasn't about following someone else's rulebook, but about writing your own, incorporating the valuable lessons while discarding the limitations. When people ask me now about the book that changed my life, I answer honestly. It was a conservative guide to traditional womanhood that inadvertently sparked a revolution of independence. My parents gave me How to Grow Up, hoping to shape me into their image of adulthood. Instead, it became the unlikely catalyst for authentic growth they never anticipated. The greatest irony? In the end, the book fulfilled its purpose perfectly. I did grow up, just not by following its rules, but by learning to write my own. Have you ever had a moment where someone's attempt to control you became your springboard to freedom? Or where you found wisdom in unexpected sources? Share your stories in the comments below. If this journey of finding independence despite obstacles resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about navigating the complicated path to authentic adulthood. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do with someone else's rulebook is to use it to write your own story of family revenge against control and limitations.